Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Thanks for showing up for another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. I'm excited about this episode, as usual, because we're going to do another deep dive into mid-term rentals. You might call them medium-term rentals, but they're longer than short-term rentals, and they really have a different strategy. But this episode, we're going a little bit behind the curtain as well, because the syndication site that most mid-term rental hosts use is Furnished Finder. My guest is Katie Lyon, the marketing director and podcast host at Furnished Finder. She's going to take us behind the scenes for a lot of stuff, but also she herself has several midterm rentals, so we go through it all. I can't wait for you to hear this show. Let's go. This is episode 178 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Katie Lyon. Katie is the marketing director and a podcast host at, if you haven't heard of it, I hope you're listening, Furnished Finder. She also has 12 midterm rentals of her own. Furnished Finder is the trusted leader in midterm rentals, providing housing for traveling professionals and families alike. And that's a growing list of people who are using it. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about midterm rentals. We've definitely had a few shows, but it's always interesting to get other people's takes on why they got into it and the background. When you were growing up, were you interested in real estate at all?
You know, I wasn't. When I was growing up, I was very interested in sports and I was interested in photography, and I really wasn't drawn too much in the business sector or investing or real estate at all. But I ended up working about 10 years of my career at a commercial real estate investment firm. So I learned a lot about real estate there and learned kind of the power of it and how it can create a lot of value, a lot of wealth, and also just the cash flow that it can create. Then I found myself at Furnished Finder, and I learned more about this midterm sector of it and just how appealing it is. It's a lot more attainable than the commercial real estate space.
Yeah. A
lot less intimidating, a lot more practical for an individual to get started in. And so my husband and I and my family, we actually started by using our old house as our first investment property.
Yeah, great.
And then it kind of snowballed from there as we realized the potential that midterms are.
Yeah, and I'm sure as you've grown from that first one, you're learning things on the go, as pretty much the whole industry is learning, what really needs to be done for midterm rentals and why they're different from short-term rentals.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of my favorite things about midterm rentals is when you do learn something or you learn how to do something better, it's very easy to implement it. And you don't have to go through like a huge system of change like you might if you have, let's say you own an entire apartment complex or you have a giant portfolio and you have to go through a lot of red tape and processes, or you have commercial real estate. I really love the fact that we can literally find a process or a procedure that works and just almost immediately implement it at all of the properties or going forward. And when we learn about, say, a new tenant type or a new audience that we can help serve with our properties, it's like we can do immediate things with it. We don't have to wait.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that, but I want to get to your journey as well. So when you got that first one, was the intent to do midterm rental right away?
So our first investment property was a little bit of a quirky situation. We were working with one of the well-known national builders to build our house that we're in right now. And they had a clause in their contract where you had to have the house that you owned currently that you were living in on the market within 7 days of signing the contract for the new build.
Interesting.
So but a new build was taking, it was taking, this was in 2020, 2021. So there was a lot of uncertainty. And I think they just really wanted to make sure that you weren't going to have any issues selling your house. Right. Like you were stuck. But it was going to take anywhere from, 10 to 12 months to build this new house.
Yeah.
So we were in a neighborhood just down the street, and we were one of a lot of families that were building into this kind of next development. And I saw all of our friends, they would do that, and then they would be moving into apartments with their families, which is completely doable, right? But we had 2 young kids, we had a dog, we had a cat, we have a freaking hedgehog. Like we just have like,
I mean, hedgehogs don't want to go into a smaller apartment. They need a midterm rental size. Yeah.
It was just like, I'm like, I do not want to live in an apartment for 10 to 12 months. I don't want to move twice. So we found a loophole in their contract that if you were going to keep your property and lease it out, you had to show a signed lease within 7 days of closing on the new build.
Okay.
So all of a sudden we realized if we did that, we could bypass a double move.
Right.
So everybody thought we were crazy. We got our parents and everything saying, well, what if you get the call at midnight that the toilet's clogged, or, what if this happens, or what if that happens? And we're like,
but were you already working at Furnished Finder when you got this?
No, at this point I wasn't. No. Okay. So at this point, and we're like, what ifs can happen all the time. So we went ahead and did it. We rented it out as a long term because at this point I didn't even know anything about midterm rentals.
Yeah. Yeah.
It went fantastic. We rented it out for about 3 years as a long term. And then I started working at Furnished Finder, and I'm like, okay, this whole landlord thing is not as intimidating as people make it seem. Nobody's calling me at 2 a.m. with their toilet clogged, right? Like I can do this. And then I started to learn about midterm, and we were originally very attracted to short term because of the higher cash flow, but we were very intimidated by the amount of just day-to-day work that it was going to take and the management of it all. So it was like, we wanted that, but it made us really nervous because we were like, we both have full-time jobs. We've got kids, we've got busy lives.
Yeah.
Like, it just didn't seem practical. And by the time you took out a management fee, if we were going to outsource that, it kind of negated the benefit. So when I discovered more about midterms by working at Furnished Finder, we decided to try that. We started with a studio arbitrage. So we started pretty much as small as you can start.
Yeah. Yeah.
It went great. That was about 2 years ago. And we just kept going. And now we're at 12.
Yeah. I mean, arbitrage is interesting and it's a great move. Did you present it as, hey, we're going to arbitrage? Because I think that's a really important thing for people. There's a lot of scammers out there who are just not really telling people. And then there's others who present it as an opportunity, and maybe you have to do a little bit more conversation with the owner. And then once they see it works, it's going to be a windfall. Yeah.
We have 3 arbitrage partners now, and all of them are 100% in the know about how we use the properties.
It benefits them. They get what they want, and you are taking care of the property much better than, probably comparable to a long-term renter with a little bit more wear and tear, but you have to make it even better because it has to be nice every time there's a changeover.
Right. Right. And the second something's not working, they know about it because we want to get a repair done quickly. We get professional pictures taken and we share them with the owner. So if they want to use them for future marketing, they can. We really try to make it so it's as good for them as it is for us. Because I think when you're in business, when you can find those types of setups that it genuinely does help both parties and you're not just making it seem like it helps both parties, that's where you get something that's really, really valuable.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for a landlord, especially for landlords who own these, maybe 12 to 20 size, they don't really love getting the tenants in and out. Maybe they're still managing themselves. They probably take bad tenants because they're just kind of lazy about it. This way, you're the tenant, you're a business, you know what you're doing. They know they're going to get paid and you're managing the in and out. And I think the explanation between midterm and short term is more, I think, more important for this arbitrage context because midterm is going to be less wear and tear, more steady people. Because you just, short term, you're just not really sure. They just direct book and there you go.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest points that I have when I'm making these initial conversations. It's we are not doing short-term rentals. We're not doing bachelorette parties. We're not doing vacation people. We're doing travel nurses, we're hosting interns, we're hosting displaced families. And then it clicks, right? Because a lot of these, like you said, these operators that have larger portfolios or a big apartment building or something, they're not familiar with the term midterm rentals always. But when you put it in perspective of them, like, yeah, I'm looking to house travel nurses, or I'm looking to house, professors that are coming in for the semester. It's like a light bulb goes off and it's like, oh, okay. Like, it's not so scary, right? It's really that you're doing a service to help your community, because these people are looking for really good, reliable, safe housing. They're not looking for a party.
Yeah, exactly. And just to what you said, when you were moving, it's like, well, I'm moving with my family. I don't need to bring all my furniture, but also I would like to have something that feels like a residence, and then I have laundry and I have a place to put stuff. And, because you're not staying a week, these are travel nurse schedule was usually like 13 weeks. So it's a fairly long stay. You want it to feel like a home. But I've always said that the most interesting thing to me is if you have someone sitting around deciding between short-term and midterm in today's environment, your spend to get a midterm ready is going to be much less, because you don't have to go berserk and have 8 pinball machines in a condo just to get it rented. And I also see that as a kind of differentiator between Airbnb and Furnished Finder. So I'd like to talk about that as well, because Furnished Finder is very straightforward. I would say less bells and whistles than Airbnb. But if you know how to do it, you can just absolutely crush it there, because that's where the people who are looking for those longer stays are looking, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like you're going back to the basics, right? Travel nurses are people who, like us, we thought we had scheduled all the padding in the world between moving into our new house. Turns out we didn't. Shocker. And we didn't know about Furnished Finder. It would have been fantastic. Yeah. But we ended up living with my in-laws for 6 weeks, it was fine. Yeah. But if we didn't necessary. Like you're saying, we didn't need pinball machines. We didn't need hot tubs. We didn't need surfboards. We needed a clean, safe home to be in. And you don't need all the bells and whistles. It's very much like back to basics. It's more about like relationships and quality over quantity, and just, you don't need board games and a crazy beach decor. You need extra linens and good towels and a teapot, right? So it's much more vanilla, but I think there's something to be said for that. It's not as flashy, but it's much more reliable, and it's much more steady. Like, if the economy takes a dip, people are still going to be traveling as travel nurses, and academics are still going to be traveling, and corporate workers are still going to be going and doing projects, even when you might not be taking that fancy vacation to Disney World.
Yeah. And after the pandemic, I think not only was it a lot of people who work from home, but a lot of traditional jobs have turned to contract work as well. So you have freelancers who can go into an area, for 3 months. Even for construction, there's a lot of construction. They bring in a lot of people. They get paid a good amount, and all they want to do is come home and sleep. And that's how it really started with travel nurses. It's like, well, they're working crazy. They're your best tenants. They're never throwing a party. They go to work all day and they sleep, and then they're gone. They're barely ever in the unit, Right. And I think that's what most of them, maybe when you're, somebody's displaced from their home because of a fire or flood or something like that, maybe they're around more, but they're used to living in a home. They're not there on a vacation.
Yeah. We have one single family home as a midterm rental right now. All the other ones are apartments or condos or townhouses, but we have a displaced family in there right now. And they called us the other day and they said one of the toilets was running, right? No big deal. And this is such a reflection on this type of tenant. He goes, I would just fix it because it's taking me longer to call you than it would to fix it, but I just don't have my tools. Yeah. And I'm like, that's the type of tenant you're dealing with, right? Like, you're not going to get a 3-star review because the toilet was leaking or running, right? It's like they're looking for just somewhere comfortable to stay. And I like what you said about the pandemic, because it's very true. I mean, I think there's like this big shift in like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And even when I look at my personal life, I used to go into the office 2 or 3 times a week. My husband did the same. Yeah. Now we both work from home full time, and we're not the exception, right? Like it's very normal. So if we wanted to go in the summer and I don't know, go spend time across the country with family, we could rent a house for a couple months. And that would be like, it wouldn't be something that you wrote home about. It'd be pretty typical, right? So there's this whole culture shift. And once you start really thinking about all the different ways that tenants can use a property for 30 days or more, it's like, oh, okay. Like there's actually a lot of demand for this.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, we always had a house in Florida. My dad was way ahead of the curve, so he was renting that out. It wasn't like, we had all of our stuff there. But then eventually he just have it. But it really solves that snowbird dilemma that's going on. You don't need to buy a house because then you can go to a different place, like one town over the next year for 2 months. And I saw that happen a lot in Florida. As someone who traveled back and forth to Florida, we stayed in a lot of what was, before short term and midterm, where you're just going to a realtor. They're basically timeshares, and that's how we did it. And we would stay for a while. And I think I always thought like that. But I think now, as you said, a lot of things have changed and people are looking at how they're going to stay and where they want to be differently. You could spend a whole year with 3 months in 4 different locations if you were remote, and then get to really know a city more, and see if you eventually want to live there. That's where I think a real advantage of, and that's why I think midterm rentals can work anywhere. I mean, literally anywhere, right?
Yeah. Oh, mine are in the middle of the Midwest. Mine are like, most of ours are, they're nowhere that you're going to find on like top 10 vacation market list, right? Like it's not going to happen. But I think we're also going to see as we enter into this next generation of investors and homeowners, it wasn't unreasonable, like you said, for your parents or my parents or anyone to have like a second home in Florida or Arizona or somewhere that was warm. That's getting harder and harder as these property prices get so high. But people are going to keep getting creative because Minnesota is always going to be a really cold winter, and a lot of snowbirds are not going to want to stay up there. So there's creative ways around that, right? You can midterm rent a property down south where it's warmer, and then you could rent out your own property when you're home or when you're not home, right? Like there's a lot of just creative ways that you can spin this whole midterm thing where that's not quite as easy to do when you have a short term. Yeah. Right. You have to do a lot more setup and prep to your property. And if you're in like a suburban market, it just might not have that demand.
Yeah.
But when I think about, okay, hey, me and my family, maybe we want to go to San Diego for 6 weeks in the summer. And I'm like, well, I still have a mortgage to pay here. Well, I would just put away some of our personal belongings and rent this place out as a midterm. Like it opens up the opportunity for house hacking in a much less kind of stereotypical way for quote unquote house hacking, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's just an easier thing to think about. You can stay longer. It's going to be less wear and tear. And I think it's just an opportunity. Like we were saying, I mean, there's so many, it really started. I remember when everyone, when MTR became like a real keyword, it was really travel nurses because of the pandemic. But then it's really slowly grown as people figured out, like, wait, there's all these other people. I've seen, just because I'm licensed as an agent also, is there's a subset of people who they need to sell. They just don't know where they're going to go, but they don't want to be contingent on their sale and their buy. So this really suits that. So for like realtor investors, it's a no-brainer to try to acquire midterms because you can put your own clients in there, either gift it to them or charge them less or charge them regular. And I think in the pricing, it's much easier also. Short terms, you're talking about dynamic pricing and vacancy, whereas, you're 13 weeks to 3 months. Great. That's 4 changeovers a year, 5. I mean, that's pretty sweet for a management point of view.
Yeah. Realtors have a huge opportunity because even just by being knowledgeable in the space, what they can offer buyers and sellers as like a tool is huge. And then once you get into helping people, either turn their property in that maybe they have a low interest rate on and they want to keep into a midterm rental, or there's so many opportunities that real estate agents have. They can become that expert in their area and start building a funnel with it, right? Like it's huge, and it's not an overly complex niche, right? Like it is back to the basics, and it's about having those relationships. And like I said, like just making quality rentals for people.
Yeah, I think the opportunity for house hackers is huge, especially the more units you have, because you can diversify your investment in so many ways. So you could live in the third unit on top, you could long-term rent the downstairs, and then you could midterm rent the second. So you get a little bump up, and then you're like, wait, actually, that went pretty well. First floor tenants leaving. Maybe I'll do midterm in both, or maybe do short term in one. It just gives you a lot more control over your property to figure out if this works. And I've seen I work with a lot of landlords, and now we're seeing like, hey, this is taking a long time to long-term rent. Maybe we should think about doing midterm. It's much easier. You don't have to over budget, like we said before, and really put the extra design in. You just need to make a creature comfort and cozy for someone who's going to be there a while.
Yeah. And people are actually, one of our properties that we are arbitraging right now was initially listed as a long-term rental. And when I had the discussion with the property manager, they weren't really interested in it. They were like, for a number of different reasons, just like the owner was out of the country. They were like, I just think it might be difficult to facilitate. And I'm like, okay, no problem. Like, because that's what you do. You just make phone calls and try to see what's a fit. They ended up having a really hard time getting it rented as a long-term for things that were, in hindsight, pretty silly, right? Like the backyard wasn't very big, and there was only like one bathtub and not two. But we ended up working together, and I'm arbitraging it with them because I've explained it to him. I'm like, those are things that in the midterm rental world, people do not care about.
Exactly.
They're very happy to have a fenced yard. It doesn't matter if it's not giant, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally having this discussion now with a client. We have it on the market. It's a lower unit, and the bedrooms are in the garden part. It's a lower duplex of a two-family. So for your long-term rent, they're always saying like, hey, well, I don't want to sleep a whole year down there. But if you're being relocated, you're looking at it the best. Wow, this is really nice.
Right.
We have 2 floors of living space. So I really agree with that. And I think it's a great way to look at properties that are a little oddball because it's serving a different purpose. And then you can curate the way you have that oddball to really cater to that avatar of the person moving in, which we've said is really a growing avatar right now, from travel nurses to contract workers. Are you seeing, just from the time you've been at Furnished Finder, just like a vast difference in who's using the properties?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When I started at Furnished Finder about 2.5 years ago, it was almost exclusively travel nurses.
Yeah.
With like sprinkles of other stuff. And I hear a lot of narrative that like travel nursing is dying and things like that. It's like, no, that's not it. Travel nursing hit this like Mount Everest peak during COVID. Right. It's just back to normal, right? But all of these other tenant types have come to life, and they're just also learning about how to use midterm rentals, about how to use Furnished Finder. So right now on Furnished Finder, there's about 30% traveling medical professionals. But again, it's not because they've shrunk. It's because the other portions have grown so much.
Yeah.
And I've seen it too. A lot of our properties, we have really designed for travel nurses. They're really close to medical campuses. They're small. They might be a studio or a 1 or 2 bed. That's just kind of the market we ended up in. But even within that, I've had people who rent out the properties because they're coming to that medical facility to get a treatment.
That's what I was just going to say. Or the family. That's what I think people forget.
Family.
Being near a hospital serves like very, very important purposes.
Yes.
There's a lot of people in long-term care that are going to be there 3-4 months. And it's nice to be able to have a nice spot similar to what we were saying for ourselves, for the relatives to stay. And, I don't stay in hotels because there's no kitchens and laundry, in the unit. And that if I know I have to be there 2 months, I don't want to overspend on a short-term rental. They give you a discount, but it's still higher than what you're going to find looking for midterm rentals.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've had people who are staying to visit family. I've had grandparents who are coming in town to spend the summer with their grandkids. Yeah. I've even had, really unfortunate circumstances. I had one woman who came because her mom was on hospice and she wanted to be close by. But
Yeah, and
for
you don't know
her,
how long it's going to be, so you need a long
right.
time. One other interesting one that I've seen is for international parents of students who go to college in America, they don't want to come over for a week. They're usually going to come
Yeah.
for a month on a break, and they need a spot too. So, I mean, we're basically expanding the audience for everybody and their thought process now
Yeah.
because it's really opening up a lot more. Hey, it's Jonathan. This is your brief interlude. I hope you're enjoying the episode with Katie Lyon. I myself got a ton of information on the first half and the back half of this episode as we kind of talked a lot about how Furnished Finder works for midterm rental hosts. And I think it's really important that you match these because Airbnb is not for midterm rentals. So Katie brings not only her personal experience, but also her employment at Furnished Finder, and we're basically giving you a masterclass on how to use the platform. I hope you're enjoying it. Stick around for the next half. Let's get to it. Let's talk about Furnished Finder, though, because it's a different product than Airbnb, and I think for your novice, they're just kind of think that it's another, syndicator. But what are the main differences between the products really of what Furnished Finder is doing and what Airbnb is doing? Nothing against Airbnb or Vrbo or HomeAway, but Furnished Finder is really a completely different thing.
Yeah, it is. And that's something that we really want to get everybody to understand is that we've taken the business model of kind of, online rentals and marketing your property and somewhat flipped it on its head. We, Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, HomeAway, all of those, the goal is you list your property and then someone books it instantly. And then that portion of the work is taken care of. So then you can focus on, communication while you have a guest in there. You can focus on all of the frills and all of the fancy stuff and making this like a great experience for that person. In my mind, short-term rentals really are an experience business, right? Midterm rentals are much more of a relationship business. So that type of booking strategy just doesn't work as well, right? If someone's going to be renting your property for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, you want to know them. Like you don't really
want a little more
want
vetting than an Instabook, please. Yeah.
Yeah. I do not want my phone to ding and just go, oops, you have a booking or like you have a booking for the next 6 months. I'm like, wait a minute. Who are you? What are you here for? So we've kind of flipped it all upside down. And on Furnished Finder, you actually pay one low subscription price per year to list your property.
Per year per property, right?
Per year per property. Yep. Right now it's $149 per year. You make it back so quick within like your first booking, obviously,
it's a no-brainer.
Right?
Yeah.
But like we say that like we're putting tenant and landlords together, right? So we have a lot of different ways that tenants can connect with landlords on the site. And then we give you the tools and you can screen the tenant and you can use an online lease and you can use a damage waiver and you can really put together your own custom process.
Right.
We have a lot of tools to help people through that. But the goal is that once you make that match and you find the right tenant for yourself, if you're charging your tenant $2,500 a month for rent, you get every cent of that. Like we don't come in and say, okay, we're going to take 10% or, okay, we're going to actually handle the processing here and we're going to take, 25% or whatever it is, right? Like we're not there to take a commission. We're not there to take a booking fee because it's really about those relationships. So we want to make the whole structure of the platform supportive of that.
Yeah, you're the conduit for them meeting and giving a lot more DIY aspect and the good thought of DIY. Like, hey, let me figure out how to run my own business. But that's also a good point for people who want to be, quote, passive, where, nothing except syndications is passive as an LP.
Right.
So you do have to be hands-on. I think I wouldn't say more hands-on than short-term rental, but it really depends on what systems you have. But as an owner or landlord, you're going to do a little bit more work, but you'll know a lot more on Furnished Finder. Am I right about that? I know that from my MTR hosts.
Yeah. You're going to be much more informed. You're going to get the chance to like do a tenant screening, to talk to this tenant. You can call them if you want, right? Like we're not there to like block sending email addresses or phone numbers or anything like that. It's like, no, please go talk and make sure it's a good fit. So it's a little bit more work, obviously, than just picking up your phone and seeing that you have a booking for the next 6 months, but it's because you get to have that control, right? So it's definitely like intentionally made that way. But then once you get your tenant in, I mean, personally, I usually hear a couple questions from my tenants the first few days they're in, and then you don't hear from them, right? And that's where it really flips. Though.
It's like, wait, where's the vacuum cleaner? Oh, it's in that closet. I thought that closet was locked. Those are you kind of like work out the kinks a couple of days, but not like in short term where, you're bordering on a 4-star review because you only have 19 rolls of toilet paper and they really need 20. It's much more of a cooperative thing, like, oh, that's how that works. And I think that goes to the communication principle that you're talking about too. You can build a little bit more in the beginning, so it's not as, hey, I'm just going to get in with a code, which, works for me. I'm not necessarily a people person. So the more detached, the better for me. But if I'm putting someone in for 16 weeks, I'd like to know a smidge more about them.
Yeah, I love that, how you said cooperative. It really is. It's like, you're building that relationship, that partnership, that like, I've got this place for you. They need that place. They don't want it. They need it. You get them set up and then they're kind of home free, right? Yeah. Versus like you said, with short term, it's really hands off when it comes to the booking. You kind of wait for it to come, but then it's like, okay, now you better perform. And if they message you asking for that 20th roll of toilet paper, if you don't respond within 48 seconds, you're risking your response rate, right? It's like,
and that's very true. And the algorithm watches that, on Airbnb and Vrbo. It's testing you on how long your response time is and will devalue you. There's lots of things that, these algorithms do. And that's just a different thing. I think when I think of Furnished Finder, I think it's giving owners a little bit more power to not almost let go of the investment. People are hiring co-hosts on Airbnb and all these things to think that it's going to run itself. But as we were saying before, toilet clogs, you're still getting a call, or the property manager's getting a call, and then you still have to manage the manager. So I think you have a little bit more control. And then you feel, in my opinion, you feel a little bit better about your investment instead of just thinking, I wonder if they're partying this weekend. Right. It sounded like 6 people for the 1 bedroom is a lot.
Right. You have so much more control. I mean, all but one of our properties are out of state and we manage them from here. And granted, I have some family locally there that can go if we need be, but there's so much more peace of mind knowing, okay, I know exactly who is in this place. I've chatted with them, or I talked on the phone, or and then I completed a tenant screening and I made sure they didn't have a criminal history. And, I know exactly why they're traveling there. Like there's so much more control. And that really, when you're thinking about, these are assets that they're investments, right? Like you put a lot of money into them. Even if you're arbitraging, you put a lot of money into it and time. You want to have that. And the unknown of like the blind booking, it to me is like a little terrifying.
I won't do direct book.
Know, I'm like, I don't know who you are. I don't know who you are. I don't know what. Yeah, it's there's a lot of trust in that, and I'm a pretty trusting person. But when someone's at my property that long, I want to know who it is.
Yeah. I mean, very fair. So how are you choosing your markets as a midterm rental investor? Because you said they're spread out. I know you're in Denver, I think, but the properties aren't that close to you. How are you finding them and why are you choosing these markets?
Yeah. When we first started, we wanted to do properties in Denver, but the Denver market is incredibly expensive. Very.
Yeah, it's hard to make expensive. Those numbers work.
It's really hard. So it's doable, but just the upfront costs are really high. So then we started to look at other options, and my family lives in the Midwest. So I was like, well, if we can't do it in my backyard, maybe we can do it in your backyard.
Yeah, smart.
And they have a really, really solid medical system where they're at, based around a university. So we also had kind of the academic pull there. And I'm like, well, this area should have tons of demand. And we started slow. Like I said, like we tested one and then we're like, that's doing great. Let's do another one. That's doing great. Let's see if we can go a little bigger or a little few miles this way or that way. We do have one property that's still in that same state, but it's a couple hours away because we wanted to test, okay, can we make this work if no one is within, like, I call it, oh crap distance?
Yeah.
So like, oh crap, the cleaner can't come. Can you come make up the room? I still don't want to drive there. Yeah. Right. So that was our test to see if we can do it without anybody in oh crap distance, which we totally can. It's harder, but it's not hard. So yeah, that's kind of how it ended up. I think we'll start expanding into some more markets, but so far it's been like this area is working really, really well. And I love investing in the Midwest personally too, because I feel like people are just, they're so great. They're so nice. Yeah. They're so, everything
you're matching midterm and the Midwest. It's like, this is a great combination here together.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's just like so approachable and, I like big cities, but I really like working with people that are not from big cities sometimes because it's just everybody's more relaxed. So it was a personal thing too.
Yeah. I mean, the price point is more attractive. Like you said, I mean, you try to get in Denver, you're competing with short-term rental, home buyers, everything is going crazy. Yeah. It's nice to look and say, well, we could get one here and it will do okay, but we could get 4 there that are also going to appreciate slower, but also become diversified assets. And I think that's why people look to the Midwest. But I love what you said, because I've always said that when people are looking out of state, the first list that they should make is first, everywhere they've ever lived or gone to school. And then list 2 is everywhere their best friends and closest family that they actually like live. And then you work around that just in case, the oh crap situation, as you said, is really perfect if you have someone there who's also interested, and then maybe you start partnering up because that location works. It's just a really smart idea, and it takes you into an area where you have at least some competitive advantage, whether it be knowledge or boots on the ground, as opposed to just saying like, well, I mean, I've heard Omaha's good, which it is, but you don't know anyone there. So you have to now curate all those relationships in the area.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to think about everything you know about the city you live in that you can't find online, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's endless. And even now, the area that we invest most of our properties in, I lived in as a kid, but then I moved here around middle school time. My brother's lived there his entire life. So all the time I just send him an address. I'll be like, address check.
Yeah.
And he'll tell me, because, in every city in America, you could be on one street and it's great, and 2 streets over and you're like, I don't love that area as much.
Yeah.
So you need someone at that level, whether it's a friend or a family member or someone you meet in some other way that you can trust their opinion. Because especially for midterms, it doesn't need to be a super fancy area, right?
Yeah. And
it just needs to be
actually
safe.
Don't need curb appeal at all.
No.
Which I think is interesting. A lot of the midterm rentals, like your first photo is not going to be the front because it's just a basic house. And then inside it's cute. But it's like you can really buy for less and do better because you're going for creature comforts again. And I really like what you said. Again, it suits what I've been saying for years, is having a real person there is great. People, I love Google Maps and Street View, but that could be 2-3 years old. So you could think, hey, look, it's next to a nice place. And then you go and that's been torn down and now it's an auto body shop because it's in, a quasi-commercial area. So you do need someone to do that drive-by, and having someone local. And then you build that relationship. It helps you be able to add more. Now you can add more to those locations because you've already worked out the kinks to see, hey, who's willing to drive over just in case.
Right. And it's much easier to find properties that check the boxes for midterm versus a short term as well.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're looking for a safe area. You're looking for, somewhere with decent parking, with good lighting. You're looking for, ideally like some sort of yard. That's one thing in midterm. About 40 to 50% of these travelers travel with a pet.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're traveling for a long time. A lot of them are traveling solo. So they've got, Hank, their golden doodle in the back seat of the car that's coming with them. And you don't really have to think about that with short term. But if you're in midterm and you can't accommodate a pet, well, you just eliminated almost half of the tenant pool.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of set of lenses that you have to look through, but it's nothing crazy. It's it's all very like, you don't have to be beachfront or downtown or anything. My brother is like our personal little property sleuth, and I'll always ask him, like, my like end of the day question is like, okay, if you were a young woman coming home at night, would you feel safe?
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm like, if the answer is yes, then that's a location and security wise, which is the number one concern, because we all know you can't change location, and the feeling of security is hard to change. But you don't have to be a fancy property to feel safe, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think if there's any hesitation in that, would a single female be good here? If once you hesitate, it's a no, just because it doesn't fit the investment type that you're trying to do, and it doesn't suit what they want out of it. So you're just missing the mark. And that's where I think, real estate's cool, because you could, like you said, you could own a property that then you want to use. You could inherit a property, but now you have all these different things that you can look at as options, especially with multifamily, and then decide when somebody says, this area is a little bit sketch for me. Then you're like, all right, let's knock out midterm. Probably not going to work for short term. So our best option is going to be long term here, or just sell it. But I think, as we expand this, there's more opportunities for people to do it. And again, with more control using Furnished Finder than maybe other sites where it's not hard to use either. For someone who's not super tech savvy, they can figure out Furnished Finder. Am I right? It's not complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because it's about those connections, right? And the connections are not something that an algorithm can give you. The connections happen from tenants reaching out to you, travelers reaching out to you, you responding to them, and asking good questions and having good conversations and presenting your property really well and keeping it accurate and updated. Those are the things that in this type of a rental matter. It doesn't, you don't need all the bells and whistles. It's almost like you want to focus on the content, and that's what matters with these partnerships.
Yeah. And I will say, even though we say that, Furnished Finder comparative to Airbnb is a little more DIY, I still think the photographs are hugely important, and I would upspend on photos. You don't have to do, shots of people eating dinner together, but the better your photos are for any of these sites, the more comforting it's going to feel, especially when we were saying for the neighborhoods, for Furnished Finder and for midterm, I think taking shots of the area around from the outside are even more important than just the front photo. Because again, Google could be outdated. So they want to get a little feel. Yeah. Where are they going to walk home? And that's where I think owners and landlords can really make a difference by creating a little bit more marketing around that, and videos about like, hey, here's how quick the walk is, and show the route to the medical center. Seems like a no-brainer, but are you seeing that's where people are winning against others who are still kind of using Craigslist tactics and just putting up a few iPhone photos?
100%. And that's always my first question. If I get chatting with a current Furnished Finder landlord and they're like, I'm not getting the results I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
They would say, it's not working for me. It's not working for me. And I'm like, okay, it's not a medication. It's not that it's not working for you. Show me, and like, let's go through it. And they pull up their listing, and it's very much the photos. And I'm like, a real estate photographer is your best friend. They are
and they're not expensive. I mean, it'd be like $100, $150. I mean, it's nothing. And it is no-brainer.
Right. I'm like, you will make that back so quickly.
You'll make it back in spades on your first booking.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then it'll be things like, oh, well, your calendar, it says that you're not available right now, or you haven't updated your calendar in 6 months.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't update your calendar in 6 months, how is that going to reflect on the platform to travelers who are looking? It's like, oh, I need to tell you when I'm available. Yes.
Kind of how it works.
Travelers need to know that, right? And things like, can you accept a pet? Right. Or if you have a really, really large security deposit, a lot of these travelers, that's not in their budget. So maybe you need to look at something like our worry-free waiver that can cover you. So a lot of times it's a very, very low-hanging fruit. But since midterm rentals are a relationship business, it's it's not set it and forget it. And that doesn't mean that you have to be in the platform every day doing stuff all the time, but you just need to keep it updated. You need to check the leads. You need to respond to leads. You need to check your messages. You need to have your notifications on.
Seems obvious.
Like, right. It's like we're not asking you to go spend 4 hours a day on Furnished Finder. That's not our goal. But when we're like serving you the tea, you've got to drink it, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's also silly to think that you would spend all this time to make your actual unit look good and then take bad pictures of a nice place. And I also think that the description is really important, because if you're focused on midterm, the more that you focus on why people are coming, this is a long stay, it's comfortable, instead of talking about the other things, this is how long, how the mileage between here and the medical center, here in the downtown, that's going to win every time. And I'm not an advocate of AI just because I think it's pretty obvious to me reading it, but you should use AI if you don't know how to write stuff like that as a bridge to getting you a first draft and then customize it for your area. Do you agree with that? Because I would read it, especially if the longer I'm staying, the more likely I am to read the full description.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I have a really hard time if I'm staring at a blank screen. So I'm like, I think, and I don't think that's uncommon, right? But like, if you're looking at like, describe your property, and I'm like, you get a little bit of paralyzed.
Get a first draft in there.
That's where you can pull in ChatGPT, have it give you a first draft, and then change 50% of it at least, right?
We are giving them great tips though, because AI has a purpose, but for me, you want to customize your listing for the area. So AI doesn't get that. They're not going to understand what the block's like and where they need to take a left, or, where you have a secret closet where there's extra special things. I think this is where that little extra time, like you said, up front will help, because it's not the same where you don't need to seasonally change out photos for midterm rentals, and you don't need to always be changing and adjusting the pricing. You're just looking for steady returns and good tenants. And again, you could have a really good year and have only 4 or 5 changeovers. Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
AI also can't brag about you. Right. And that's one thing about being a midterm rental. It's not just all about your property. Tenants want to hear that you are a responsible and responsive landlord, and that you care about your tenants, and that you have good reviews. And, maybe that if they move in and they drink tea and not coffee, that you'll send a coffee pot or a teapot, right? Like, they want to know, because again, they're not staying there for a weekend. You can deal with an annoying Airbnb host for a weekend. Yeah. They want to have a good landlord for 3 to 6 to 9 months, right? So it's like, take the time to also educate and market yourself. And I think some people that feels really uncomfortable, but you got to get good at it, because it's part of the deal, right? Like, you're also marketing that relationship.
Yeah, I have a pro tip I want to get your tip on. So for any short-term or mid-term that I have, I always try to send a friend first as a tester so they can say what I'm missing. It doesn't matter how many times you go over your kitchen, you're always missing something. And you should have coffee and tea for people. It's a midterm, it's a longer stay. You probably need more than one colander, which I always joke about. But like, if they're staying 13 weeks, they might need to drain peas and pasta at the same time. So you really have to, I just don't think you'll always think you have it until someone goes, and you don't want that someone to be someone who's going to give you a bad review or complain all the time. Do you agree with that? And think there's always someone who'll go for free. Like, come on, it's fun.
I love that. I 100% agree. And I would say, if you can't, or even if you can, in addition, I always tell every single tenant, I'm like, hey, we have furnished this apartment to the best of our ability. But if there's something you're right. If there's something you need, please tell us, and don't just go buying it on Amazon, right? Like, if you are finding that it's chilly in the winter and you want a really big fluffy blanket, you won't be the last person who wants that. So we would be happy to get it for you. Please don't feel like if this property is missing something that it's automatically on you. And some people are afraid if you communicate that message that you'll get taken advantage of, and people will just send a list of all their wants. It's like, that's not the tenants. And you can always say no, but it's like you said, the kitchen in particular, there's certain things that we always go back and forth on, like a toaster and a blender. And because those are like some of the appliances that you either use them or you don't.
Yeah.
So sometimes we toy with like if we get them or not, or sometimes I'm just gonna be like, I'm gonna wait and see if anybody.
I would be a yes on
for...
a toaster and blender, and I would be a no on a waffle maker. I see a lot of waffle makers, but I feel like that's something you bring with you.
Right. So it's like that line is fuzzy sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's very personal because I haven't had a cup of tea in 20 years, but I drink coffee like it's going out of style.
Well, I'm the opposite though.
Yeah.
So when I go, most places are more coffee friendly, but I've seen an uptick of people just having a giant thing of teas, which I bring my own, but I still need the boiler. So,
right.
These are things to think of. And yeah, you can't overcompensate and have one of everything, a waffle maker and a pasta maker. It's like, relax.
Right.
Like that's something they can get on Amazon. They're going to be there 13 weeks and then they can take it home with them if they don't have one. And a lot of people do bring stuff with them because they're staying for a while.
Yeah. But I've had people who they'll ask for some sort of kitchen gadget and I'll be like, oh yeah, sure. I'll send it from Amazon or Walmart. And they are so amazed and happy that you're willing to do that. That $20 or whatever it took you. Not only did you add something that'll stay at the property, but the amount that you just like increased that relationship, right? Like now they see you as a true partner. And you know what? Next time the smoke alarm batteries go out, they might just change them because it's a relationship now, not just a transaction.
And to what you said at the beginning, this is a relationship site where you're building that first. It's just a different thing. And I love the way that you put it. And I would have that as part of the description or in there wherever you can, saying like, hey, if there's something missing, you're going to help me. Your quote was, you're not going to be the only person who asks for the fluffy blanket. And that's a great way to put it, where they're not going to ask for 10 things. They're going to ask for things that they know other people are going to want. And it's also a tip off for, hey, I'm sending it to the house, not to you as a present. So I know you like that blanket, but leave it behind and buy your own.
Yeah. But you learn that too, right? Like we always put blackout curtains in all of the properties. And I had one night nurse who stayed at one of them recently, and she goes, I know these curtains you put up are technically blackout curtains, but they're actually pretty terrible. And she wasn't being mean. And I was like, okay, that sucks. I'm so sorry. Like, I haven't slept during the day there.
Yeah, right.
And she was like, no big deal. And, I had some delivered from Walmart and she swapped them out for me. And some people will say, oh, you shouldn't expect that of your tenants. And I don't at all. I would be happy to send a handyman or my brother or someone to swap them out. But for her, it's like I'm doing the favor of getting the better curtains when technically they're already blackout, right?
Right.
And then she didn't have to worry about someone else coming into the unit and whatever. And she got better sleep. So it's like, it's not as transactional as like, oh, well, I shouldn't have had to do that or whatever. It's you're both working together to make this as successful as you can.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key words that we've talked about so much, partnership, cooperative, I mean, these are the things that Furnished Finder is built on, where it's just a different product. And I think for people who are interested in getting the game, midterm is a little bit of a softer landing spot than short term. It's less pressure. And I personally, and as we wrap up, I just want to get you, I really think that you can do a midterm rental in any town in the country. Literally anyone. I think it would work. And if you don't have a medical establishment, then you're just going to try to build insurance relationships. There's always people who have floods and fires in their home, and they're not going to want to stay in a Marriott or Hilton Garden Inn for 3 months.
Yeah. Last year at BPCon, we had a lot of people who came up to our booth and they would say, can you tell me if my market or my property would be good for a midterm rental? And I was like, sure. Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's not, you think with long-term, it's got to fit, especially in today's market, really specific numbers. With short-term, you got to have the demand there for short-term. For midterm, it's like, yes, your property will do well as a midterm. Yeah. You just need to figure out how it's going to do well as a midterm. Like you said, is it displaced families? Is it medical travelers? Is it corporate workers?
Yeah.
You need to figure out how it works, not if it works.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, I think I really hope that we've unlocked some stuff here, especially with your experience working for Furnished Finder, because again, there's a lot of people trying to get into investing, and I think they go into too many risky things first. They want to be a house flipper. They want to buy a 4-family. They don't even know what they're doing. This is a very easy entry spot. And if you learn about arbitrage the right way, as you've said, you have a few that are arbitrage. If you present it the right way and know what you're doing, I think you can be in great shape.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I look forward to staying in touch. I'm glad we got this done.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. That was Katie Lyon. She is the marketing director and a podcast host at Furnished Finder. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I know you're here because you get a free preview of the next episode. That's why the end is great. Listening all the way through is really important. I really appreciate it. Next episode, my guest is Blake Daly. He's the founder of Boutique Hotel Con, the conference for boutique hotels, and they just had it. I saw on social a bunch of stuff about it as I knew people that were there. Now, Blake started investing when he was in the military, figured out which asset classes he liked. We go through his whole story and how he ended up with boutique hotels. I really think you're going to enjoy this. We've talked hotels on a few different shows, but we haven't gone this in depth on this particular topic. We'll see you next episode with Blake Daly.